Welcome to the channel. Now you might think you know a thing or two about military hardware. A tank's a tank, right? A gun's a gun. Well, prepare to have your tiny minds blown wider than a poorly maintained howitzer. Because today, we're delving into the weird, the wacky, and the downright unbelievable world of military machines. We're talking about contraptions so outlandish, so ludicrously conceived that you'll wonder if the engineers were fueled by bathtub gin and late-night cheese sandwiches. From tanks that look like they belong in a circus to submarines that would make a dolphin blush, we've got it all. So buckle up, strap yourselves in, and for heaven's sake try to keep your lunch down because what you're about to see will redefine your understanding of military might. Honestly, you couldn't make this stuff up. Right, first up we're heading east to the wilds of Russia, where the vodka flows like water, and the military ideas are, well, let's just say unique. Picture this. The year is 1915, World War I is raging, and the Russians decide they need a secret weapon. What do they come up with? A bloody enormous tricycle, of course, I'm not joking. They called it the Tsar tank, and it was about as practical as a chocolate teapot in a heat wave. This thing was huge, with wheels so big they'd make a monster truck jealous. The idea was that it could simply roll over obstacles, trenches, you name it. Problem is, it got stuck. A lot. Turns out, building a tank on what are essentially giant bicycle wheels isn't the best engineering strategy. Who'd have thought it, eh? They only ever built one prototype, and frankly, that's one too many. It's like someone looked at a tank and a penny farthing and thought, yeah, let's combine those. Honestly, the mind boggles. From one Russian oddity to another, and this time things get a bit more amphibious. Meet the Ekranoplan, a ground effect vehicle that looks like a love child between a jumbo jet and a pancake. Seriously, this thing was massive. The Soviets, in their infinite wisdom, decided that what they really needed was a plane that could also skim across the water at high speed. Why? I haven't the foggiest. Maybe they were bored, maybe they'd run out of vodka. Whatever the reason, the Ekranoplan was born. Now, I'll grant you it looked impressive in a communist propaganda poster kind of way. But practical? Not so much. It guzzled fuel faster than a pub crawl on payday, and it couldn't decide if it wanted to be a plane or a boat. Ultimately, the whole project was about as useful as a screen door on a submarine. Still, you've got to admire the sheer audacity of it all, haven't you? Next up, we're off to America, the land of the free, the home of the brave, and apparently the birthplace of the bat bomb. Yes, you heard that right. Bat bombs. Now, I've heard some barmy military ideas in my time, but this one takes the biscuit. During World War II, some bright spark decided it would be a brilliant idea to strap tiny incendiary devices to bats and release them over enemy cities. The plan was that the bats would roost in attics and eaves, the bombs would ignite, and boom, instant inferno. What could possibly go wrong? Well, for starters, bats are notoriously difficult to train. And as it turns out, they have a nasty habit of, flying away and roosting wherever they damn well please. The whole project was quietly shelved, presumably before America accidentally incinerated itself with exploding bat guano. Pigeon-guided missiles, feathered friends, or feathered foes. Sticking with the animal kingdom, but this time with slightly less flammable participants, we have the pigeon-guided missile. Yes, really, back in the dark days of World War II, the Americans were seemingly obsessed with weaponizing the natural world. This time, it was pigeons in the firing line. The idea was to train these feathered fiends to peck at a target on a screen inside a missile. The pecking would then, somehow, steer the missile towards its target. It sounds like something out of a Monty Python sketch, doesn't it? Amazingly, it sort of worked. Pigeons, it turns out, are surprisingly good at recognizing targets. Who knew? But despite some promising early results, the project was eventually abandoned. Perhaps the thought of relying on a bird with a brain the size of a pea to win a world war was a step too far, even for the Americans. Chapter 5. The Goliath Tracked Mine Remote-Controlled Terror. Right, enough about animals. Let's get back to machines that are supposed to be terrifying, not trained by them. This time we're off to Germany, where they took the concept of remote control to a whole new level with the Goliath Tracked Mine. Imagine, if you will, a miniature tank. Now imagine it's packed with explosives. Now imagine some poor sod having to control this thing with a joystick while it trundled towards enemy lines. Terrifying, isn't it? That was the Goliath in a nutshell. It was essentially a mobile bomb, designed to blow up tanks, fortifications, anything that got in its way. Of course, being German, it was over-engineered and prone to breaking down. Plus, the long control cable meant it could get tangled up in anything from barbed wire to particularly stubborn shrubbery. Still, you've got to admire the sheer terrifying ingenuity of it all. Chapter 6. Ripsaw. EV-2, because who doesn't want a luxury tank? Now who says military machines can't be luxurious? Enter the Ripsaw EV-2, a high-speed tank that's more likely to be found cruising Rodeo Drive than a war zone. This beast is basically a Lamborghini on tracks with a price tag to match. It's got a 1,500 horsepower engine, can hit speeds of over 60 miles per hour, and comes with all the bells and whistles you'd expect from a high-end sports car. Of course, it also comes equipped with optional armor plating and weapon mounts just in case you fancy taking on a small army on your way to the shops. Frankly, the whole thing is a bit much, even for me. I mean, who needs a tank that can outrun a Ferrari? Still, if you've got more money than sense and a penchant for the extravagant, the Ripsaw EV-2 might just be the ultimate boy's toy. Chapter 7. The Sturmtiger. Because sometimes bigger is better, but mostly just weirder. Back to World War II we go. And this time it's the Germans again, with their penchant for building things that are just plain massive. I give you the Sturmtiger. A tank so big, so heavily armed that it makes the other tanks look like toy poodles. This thing was essentially a mobile bunker, with a gun so big it could fire a shell the size of a small car. Seriously, this thing was ridiculous. The problem was, it was about as practical as a pair of swimming trunks in the Arctic. It was slow, cumbersome, and guzzled fuel like it was going out of fashion. Plus, the recoil from that monstrous gun was so powerful it could allegedly knock the turret clean off. Not exactly a selling point, is it? Chapter 8. The K-222 Submarine, the Underwater Speed Demon. From the depths of World War II, we dive into the ocean depths with the K-222 submarine. Now, I'm not usually one for nautical nonsense, but even I have to admit this thing is impressive. It's the fastest submarine ever built, capable of hitting speeds of over 44 knots. That's faster than most speedboats. The Soviets, bless their cotton socks, wanted a sub that could outrun torpedoes. And for a while, the K-222 was it. Problem was, it was about as subtle as a mariachi band in a library. The noise it generated was deafening, and the entire thing vibrated so violently at high speeds that it was practically shaking itself apart. It was like trying to drive a supercar made of jelly. Chapter 9. The M50 Ontos, small package, big punch. From one extreme to the other, we have the M50 Ontos. A tank so small, you could almost miss it. Almost. This American-made oddity was essentially a lightly armored box on wheels, but don't let its diminutive size fool you. This thing packed a serious punch. It was armed with not one, not two, but 6 recoilless rifles, all pointing in the same direction. That's right, 6. It was like a shotgun blast on wheels. The idea was to overwhelm enemy tanks with sheer firepower, and for a while it worked. The Ontos was surprisingly effective in combat, earning itself the nickname, the Thing from the Viet Cong. Not exactly catchy, but I suppose it got the point across. Chapter 10. The Hiller Flying Platform, your personal hovercraft, batteries not included. And finally we end our journey into the bizarre world of military machines with something that's straight out of science fiction. The Hiller Flying Platform. Imagine a helicopter. Now, imagine it without a cabin, a tail rotor, or any semblance of safety regulations. That's the Hiller Flying Platform. This thing was basically a platform with 2 rotors sticking out of it, controlled by the rider shifting their weight. It was like trying to fly a giant, angry ceiling fan. Unsurprisingly, the project never really got off the ground. It was unstable, difficult to control, and prone to crashing, often with hilarious consequences. Still, you've got to admire the sheer lunacy of it all. I mean, who wouldn't want a personal hovercraft, even if it did try to kill you every time you took it for a spin? Well, there you have it. 10 of the strangest, most outlandish military machines ever conceived. I bet you never thought you'd see the day when bats, pigeons, and luxury tanks shared the same battlefield, did you? The human mind is a truly strange and wonderful thing, especially when it's let loose in the world of military research and development. From the downright dangerous to the hilariously impractical, these machines prove that when it comes to warfare, truth really is stranger than fiction. So, the next time you think about the military, don't just think about tanks and guns and all that sensible stuff. Remember the Tsar tank, the Ekranoplan, and of course, the Bat Bomb. And spare a thought for the poor souls who had to try and make these crazy contraptions work.